They said it happened in less than 3 minutes. One moment, Earth was alive. An endless chorus of voices, laughter, and human noise carried to the quantum net that tied our colonies together. The next, static. Not a word. Not a whisper. When I replayed in my head, I can still hear the silence. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the crushing weight of it, as if 10 billion souls had been yanked from a universe and the stars themselves had flinched. I was stationed on Kepler Outpost 47, a nowhere mining colony with a skeleton crew. We didn't matter. At least, that's what I thought at the time. Just dust, rocks, and broken drill systems. Yet, when Earth fell silent, the weight of the universe shifted, and suddenly every outpost, every forgotten station, every scattered human became something more. We became the survivors. I was in the comms room when the final transmission reached us. It wasn't even words, just an audio spike, the scream of a dying signal clawing through interference. But if you listened closely, buried in the static, you could hear something else. Fire. Not literal flames, but the roar of destruction, the thunder of cities torn apart, the collapse of everything we once called home. The crew didn't believe me. "You're hearing ghosts," they said. Just the distortion. But I knew that sound lived in me from that moment forward. Earth wasn't just gone. It had been burned. We were 500 light years away, watching helplessly as the cradle of humanity was stolen. The first weeks after the silence were chaos. Colonies panicked. Supply lines collapsed, and the Council of Colonies, those smug bureaucrats who'd always leaned on Earth's authority, suddenly had no anchor. They tried to keep order, but every broadcast rang hollow. Because without Earth, who were we? For a time, I thought humanity might simply dissolve, scatter into the void like ash, drift leaderless, until memory faded and silence became our inheritance. But I was wrong, because Earth had not just fallen silent. It had spoken, and one day we would learn to answer. When the first refugee ships arrived at Kepler Outpost 47, we didn't recognize them for what they were. The sensors picked up half-broken hulls limping through the void, engines screaming with stress fractures, and oxygen reading so low it was a miracle anyone inside was alive. To us, they looked like derelicts, wrecks. But when the docking clamp sealed and the airlock cycled, they spilled into our station like ghosts dragging themselves out of the grave. Men, women, children, eyes sunken, cheeks hollow, skin pale from too many days trapped in dying ships. Earthborn, I'll never forget the first one who stepped forward. A woman, clutching a little boy to her chest, his face streaked with soot. Her hair was matted, her lips cracked, but her eyes still carried something of earth in them. "Please," she whispered, though no one had asked her to speak. "Don't let us die out here." That broke us. Kepler was not a hub. We had food for maybe 100, fuel for a handful of haulers, and supplies rationed tighter than a miser's fist. But none of that mattered anymore. The moment those survivors set foot on our deck, our world changed. The station commander, Lien Vero, tried to argue logistics. "We can't sustain this many mouths," she said, voice tight with calculation. "If more ships come, we'll starve." But I was standing there in the docking bay, watching that woman's trembling hands cling to her child. Something inside me snapped. "Then we'll starve together," I said. The refugees brought stories. Horrors, really. They told us of the arrival. A fleet that appeared without warning, black ships blotting out the sky over Earth. They weren't the sleek cruisers of the Council, or the industrial hulks of mining guilds. These ships were jagged, scarred, as though forged in some cosmic furnace of hate. The attackers didn't come to negotiate. They didn't come to conquer. They came to burn. The first strikes tore through orbital defenses in hours. Then the bombardment began. Cities turned to glass. Oceans boiled. Skies choked with ash. And through it all, the enemy broadcast one message, in every tongue, on every channel. "Your voice ends here. Humanity will be forgotten." That was the silence we heard. Not just destruction, but erasure. Yet somehow some survived. Families who slipped through blockades, military craft that fled when the front collapsed, smugglers who ran the gauntlet of fire. They scattered like sparks across the void. And now, those sparks were finding their way to us. In the following weeks, more ships came. Some carried dozens. Others carried only a handful. Each new arrival brought another shard of Earth's memory. Songs, stories, relics wrapped in cloth and guarded like holy artifacts. A cracked violin, a box of soil, a recording of a grandmother's laugh. And with each arrival, the weight of our responsibility grew heavier. Kepler was becoming something new, not an outpost, not a mining station, a refuge. But with refuge came danger, because wherever the survivors fled, the hunters followed. It began with whispers from the comms, broken transmissions of colonies gone dark, patrol ships that never returned, merchant lanes cut like severed arteries. The invaders weren't finished. They were spreading, hunting the embers of humanity across the stars, determined to snuff them all out. One night, if you can call anything night in space, I stood in the observation deck, staring at the fractured hulls of refugee ships tethered outside. The stars beyond seemed cruelly indifferent, burning as they always had, while everything I had ever known withered. Beside me, a boy, maybe 12, one of the refugees, pressed his hand against the glass. His other hand clutched a half-broken model of some Earth landmark, the name of which I didn't recognize. "Will they find us here?" he asked quietly. I wanted to lie, to tell him no, to say Kepler was safe. But my throat tightened. The words wouldn't come. Instead, I said, "If they do, we'll be ready." And in that moment, I realized something. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were witnesses, carriers of a flame that something had tried to smother. But fire has a way of spreading, even in the cold void. And if the hunters came for us, we would not whisper. We would speak in fire. The first time we saw one of their ships up close, I understood why so many called them monsters. It came drifting out of the void without warning, its hull jagged and uneven, like a shard of obsidian broken from some ancient world. It wasn't sleek like our council frigates or brutalist like the mining haulers. It was something else entirely, designed to terrify. Our scanners lit up, warning of weapon signatures we didn't even recognize. Half the systems flickered, as if the ship's very presence was poison in our electronics. Commander Lien ordered a lockdown. No transmissions. No signals. If they don't know we're here, we live another day. But they knew. I felt it in my bones. The hunters weren't wandering aimlessly. They had followed the refugees, like wolves tracking blood through snow. And now they were at our door. We crammed into command deck, eyes glued to the view screen as the black ship hovered just beyond a debris field orbiting Kepler. Its surface rippled faintly, as though the hull itself was alive, drinking starlight. Then came the voice. "We smell your ash. We hear you're dying. Open, and your suffering will be short." The words weren't in any human tongue, yet every one of us understood them. It wasn't translation, it was intrusion, a crawling sensation in my skull, like their voice was inside my blood. The refugees panicked. Some screamed, some prayed. A few begged Lien to surrender, to throw open the airlocks and hope for mercy. But there was no mercy in that voice. We had 3 choices: run, hide, or fight. Running wasn't possible. Our ships were slow, half-broken, and packed with civilians. Hiding? Maybe if we cut power and drifted, but then we'd suffocate in hours. That left one choice. Lien's voice trembled, but it carried steel. Weapons online. If they want us, they'll bleed for it. Weapons. That was almost laughable. Kepler wasn't a military base. We had a few anti-meteor cannons, some pulse batteries older than me, and maybe enough munitions for a 30-second barrage. Against that ship, we might as well throw rocks. But something shifted in the room when she gave that order. A flicker of defiance. Refugees who had been broken, hollow, suddenly lifted their heads. We would fight, I volunteered to man one of the gunnery stations. My hand shook as I strapped in, staring at the controls. The refugees had filled the corridors with whispered prayers and quiet sobs, but in the gunnery bay, there was only silence, the kind before a storm. Then the ship moved. It glided forward, dark and hungry, cutting through the void with a predatory grace. Weapons ports open along its hull like black eyes blinking awake. And that was when we fired. The first volley streaked into the void, bright lances of plasma and tungsten. They splashed against the hunters' shields, bursts of light blooming like fireflies against a wall. Futile, but we cheered anyway. For the first time since the silence, we were not prey cowering in the dark. We were human, and humans fight. The return fire came an instant later. A single beam carved through Kepler's outer hull, venting an entire wing into vacuum. Sirens wailed. Bulkheads slammed shut. I felt the deck tremble beneath me. But we were still alive. We fired again. And again. And again. Our guns screamed defiance into the void, every shot a refusal to vanish quietly. And then something unexpected happened. The hunter hesitated. Its weapon slowed. Its shields flickered. Our scanners registered strained fluctuations, as if the ship itself was struggling to hold form. "Commander," I said, my voice raw, "they're not invincible." For the first time in days, hope bled into the room, but before we could press the advantage, the black ship unleashed a pulse. Not a weapon, not directly. A message. You will learn. Fire cannot save you. Fire consumes. And then it was gone, vanished into the void like it had never been there. We were left shaken, battered, but alive. In the aftermath, as engineers scrambled to patch the wounds in our station and refugees wept in halls, I sat alone in the gunnery bay, staring at the stars. The hunters had found us. They had tested us. And though we had survived, I knew they would return. Stronger, more prepared. Yet something inside me had changed. They feared our fire, even if they wouldn't admit it. And when they came back, I swore to myself we would not burn alone. We would make the stars burn with us. In the days after the hunters' retreat, Kepler Outpost was a graveyard held together by tape and willpower. Half our outer ring was gone, sealed behind emergency bulkheads. The air recyclers wheezed under the strain of twice their intended population. Power rationing turned nights into a suffocating dark. But for the first time since the silence, there was something in the air besides fear. Hope. It was fragile, barely more than an ember, but it glowed in every whispered conversation, in every refugee's eyes as they stared out into the void. We had faced a hunter and survived. That meant something. At least, it did to me. Commander Lien called a council in the central dome. Officers, engineers, refugees, anyone who had something to offer. I sat near the back, still smelling of burnt insulation from patching power conduits. Lien stood at the center, her face hard but her shoulders bowed from exhaustion. "We have two paths," she said. "We can run. Abandon Kepler. Scatter to the colonies. Hope the hunters never find us again. Or," her voice sharpened, "we fight." Murmurs rippled through the room. A refugee, a wiry man with a cracked voice, shouted back, "Fight with what? Rusted guns? Scrap ships? You saw what they did with one shot." Others nodded. Fear was still heavy in the air, choking. But then a voice I didn't expect spoke up. The woman I'd first seen in the docking bay. The one clutching her child. She stepped forward, eyes steady, voice firm. "They tried to erase us," she said. "I saw them burn my city. I heard them say our voices would end. And yet, I am still here. My son is still here. You are all still here. Isn't that proof enough?" The dome fell silent. And I swear in that silence, something shifted. Not all at once. Not a sudden roar of agreement. Just a slow realization that she was right. The hunters had failed. Earth was gone, but humanity remained. Lien's gaze swept the room. If we fight, we do not fight alone. We link with other survivors. We build, we plan, we strike where it hurts. We do not wait for the fire to consume us. We become the fire. That was the spark. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a plan carved in stone. It was a decision to stop running. The weeks that followed turned Kepler into something unrecognizable. Our engineers stripped every derelict refugee ship for parts. The mining guild technicians rigged plasma drills into makeshift cannons. Children carried food and water to workers in the bays. Soldiers, those few who had escaped Earth's defense fleets, trained farmers and miners in basic combat. We weren't building an army. Not yet. We were building a flame. I spent my days in the gunnery bays, learning every weakness in the old pulse batteries. At night, I listened to survivors' stories. Some wept as they spoke. Some couldn't speak at all. But every story became fuel, a reminder of why we could not go quietly. And slowly, rumors began to spread. Other colonies had survived. Outposts like ours had fought and lived. Scattered bands of humans were beginning to stir. A resistance. The hunters thought they had silenced us. Instead, they had scattered the sparks of Earth across the galaxy. And sparks, when they gather, can set the stars ablaze. I remember the night it became real. I was on the observation deck again, staring into the black, when the comms officer burst in. Her eyes were wide, her hands trembling as she held out a data slate. Signal, she whispered. Encrypted human origin, not from Kepler. I grabbed it. My heart hammered as the cracked transmission flickered to life. A voice, rough with static, but unmistakably human. To any survivors, we are not broken. We are not silent. We are the flame. If you can hear this, you are not alone. The room erupted in cheers. Some wept. Some fell to their knees. I pressed my hand against the console, my throat raw. We were not alone. The hunters had made a mistake. They thought Earth was humanity. They thought by silencing one world, they could silence us all. But Earth was never just a place. Earth was every voice that refused to bow, every hand that fought back, every heart that carried the fire into the void. And now, scattered across the stars, those hearts were beating in unison. The hunters wanted silence. What they had created instead was a war. The signal changed everything. We played it a dozen times that night, huddled around the comms console, listening to the broken words like scripture. Survivors, fighters, humans who refused to vanish into the dark. And then came the coordinates. Not Earth, not a colony. A dead mining moon on the edge of nowhere. But it was a rally point, a place where the scattered embers of humanity could gather. Commander Lien made a decision fast. We go, she said. Kepler can't hold forever. If there's a chance to link with others, we take it. The station came alive with movement. Engineers stripped what was left of Kepler's outer ring, salvaging panels and conduits for the journey. Families packed their meager belongings. The pulse batteries, our one proof we could wound the hunter, were dismantled and bolted onto the refugee ships. Leaving Kepler felt like tearing out a piece of myself. The station had been our shield, our graveyard, our home. But it was also a tomb waiting to happen. We were done waiting. The convoy launched in silence. 15 ships, most of them barely holding together, crawling into the void with drives patched by desperation and prayer. I piloted one of the haulers, my hands white-knuckled on the controls. For days, the stars stretched endless and empty. Every blip on the scanner made my pulse spike. Every flicker of static made me fear the hunters had found us again. But then, on the 5th day, the moon appeared. At first it looked like nothing. A jagged rock drifting in a barren system, scarred from centuries of mining. But as we drew closer, lights bloomed on its surface. Beacons. And then the ships emerged. Dozens of them. Some military. Some civilian. Some cobbled together from parts that had no right flying in formation. They circled the moon like sentinels, their hulls scarred but unbroken. Human ships. We weren't the only ones. The docking bay was chaos when we arrived. Refugees flooding into arms that hadn't hugged in months. Soldiers saluting strangers like brothers. Engineers trading parts like sacred relics. I had never seen so many humans in one place since Earth fell. It felt like coming home, even if the home was nothing more than hollowed stone and metal. The leaders gathered in the moon's central chamber. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was just a minor turn gunner. But somehow I found myself standing in the back, listening as they argued. We can't survive another attack like Kepler. One officer said, voice raw, we need to scatter again. Stay hidden. No, another snapped. A woman with the sharp posture of an Earthfleet captain. Running is what they expect. Running is what prey does. We have numbers. We have fire. We strike. The room erupted with shouts. Fear against affiance. Desperation against pride. And then, from the far side of the table, a voice cut through. Calm. Steady. We don't strike to win, he said. Not yet. We strike to remind them. All eyes turned to him. He was older, gray streaks in his hair, the uniform of a general hanging loose on his frame. He looked tired, like the rest of us, but his eyes burned. They believe they silenced Earth, he said. They believe humanity has no voice left. So we give them one, a message written in fire, not a battle, a warning. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a growl. You failed to kill us, and now we are coming for you. The plan was reckless, maybe suicidal, but it was the only plan that felt like life instead of waiting for death. A hunter ship had been sighted patrolling the nearby trade routes, not the massive fleet that destroyed Earth, but a single vessel, scouting, hunting stragglers. We would take it. The days that followed were a frenzy. Engineers mounted weapons on ships never meant for war. Old freighters were rigged with explosives. Soldiers drilled untrained refugees in makeshift militias. I was assigned to the Orion's wake, a battered hauler reinforced with scavenged armor plating, and 2 of Kepler's pulse batteries bolted to its hull. We weren't sleek. We weren't strong. But we were determined. On the eve of battle, I found myself staring at the stars again. That endless canvas that had once felt like promise, but now looked like a hunting ground. The boy with the model ship, the one who had asked if we'd be safe, stood beside me. He held the cracked toy in both hands, his eyes steady. Will we win? He asked. I swallowed hard. The truth stuck in my throat. We don't have to win, I said softly. We just have to make them remember who we are. He nodded, as if that was enough. And maybe it was when dawn, if you can call orbital mechanics dawn, came, our fleet rose from the moon's shadow. We weren't sleek warships. We weren't an army. We were survivors, scavengers, refugees. But together, we looked like something else. We looked like a flame. And we were about to set the void alight. We found the hunter's ship 3 days later. It was larger than the one that had stalked Kepler. Its jagged hull stretched like the ribcage of some dead beast. It drifted along the trade route with predatory patience, waiting for another refugee convoy to stumble into its maw. But this time the prey had teeth. Our fleet rose in the shadows of a gas giant's rings. Engines muted, hulls masked by debris fields. Old haulers, gutted mining ships, even passenger liners, patched, scarred, bristling with stolen weapons. It wasn't a navy. It was desperation forged into defiance. I sat strapped into the gunner's chair of the Orion's wake, fingers trembling on the firing controls. Around me, the crew muttered prayers and curses in equal measure. Remember, the general's voice came over comms, calm and sharp as steel. We are not here to survive. We are here to speak. Every shot you fire is a word. Make them listen. The trap sprang. Our decoy freighter lit its engines, lurching into the hunter's path. As expected, the predator moved instantly, weapons warming, eager for the kill. That's when we struck. From the rings, a storm of human ships surged forward. Pulse cannons roared. Torpedoes streaked like falling stars. Improvised railguns spat tungsten slugs scavenged from mining drills. The first volley slammed into the hunter's shields, light exploding across its surface. Not enough to break through, but enough to stagger it. Cheers erupted across our comms. "Again!" the general barked. The void filled with fire. I squeezed the triggers, sending blast after blast into the black hole. Each impact was a spark. Each spark another piece of our voice, screaming into the silence they had tried to cage us in. The hunter struck back. Beams lanced out, white-hot, carving through one of our freighters. The ship exploded, shards scattering like ash across the stars. The cheer in my throat died, replaced by rage. We fired harder. Another hauler rammed straight into the hunter's flank, detonating its cargo of fuel. The explosion rippled across its shields, tearing a scar in the black metal beneath. "They bleed," someone shouted over comms. "They can bleed." The battle was chaos. Ships darting, burning, colliding. Every second cost us lives. But for the first time, the hunters weren't reaping humanity like grain. We were burning them. Then came the moment I'll never forget. The hunter's shields collapsed with a flicker. Its hull lay exposed, black and jagged, thrumming with an unnatural glow. For one heartbeat, the stars seemed to hold their breath. And then every ship fired at once. Pulse batteries, railguns, torpedoes, even jury-rigged mining lasers. All of it converged in a storm of fire that tore into the hunter's ribs and ripped them open. The explosion was silent, but in my head it roared like thunder. The black ship broke apart, fragments scattering into the void, fire trailing like veins of molten glass. We had killed it. We, the broken, the scattered, the forgotten, had destroyed one of the monsters that burned Earth. The comms erupted into chaos. Laughter, tears, shouts of triumph. For the first time since the silence, we weren't prey. We were the fire. But even in our celebration, I felt the shadow of what we had unleashed. Because if we could kill one hunter, then the others would come. Not just one, not just a patrol. The fleet that burned Earth would turn its gaze on us. And the stars would burn for real. The wreckage of the hunter still burned in orbit when the message spread. Across the void, through the cracked comm relays and scavenged transmitters, humanity's voice carried for the first time since Earth's fall. A voice written in wreckage, in fire, in the fact that one of the monsters had died screaming. We thought the galaxy would ignore us. We were wrong. The silence broke. Signals came flooding in, fragmented, distorted, desperate. Colonies we thought destroyed. Fleets we thought scattered. Stragglers, smugglers, soldiers. All of them had heard. All of them were rising. "You killed one!" A voice crackled over our comms, laughter bubbling through static. "Then we'll kill two. Asterisk, they'll come for you," another warned. "But they'll find all of us waiting." The sparks were catching. The fire was spreading. But so, too, was a shadow. Our scouts brought back grim news. Hunter fleets were moving. Not patrols. Not lone ships. Armadas. The predators had heard our voice, and they were coming to silence it once and for all. Some argued to scatter again, to run, to vanish. But when the leaders gathered on the mined-out moon, the general spoke words that etched themselves into history. They wanted silence, he said, voice carrying through the chamber. We gave them fire, and now they bring their armadas to extinguish it. Let them come. We will not whisper. We will not scatter. We will burn so bright the stars themselves will carry our voice. And so the choice was made. We would not hide. We would fight. The preparations were frantic. Every hull was stripped for parts, every ship armed with whatever we could forge. Mining lasers became siege beams. Freighters became battering rams. Even escape pods were rigged with explosives. I worked until my hands bled, patching conduits, rigging batteries, welding armor plates scavenged from broken hulls. We weren't building ships anymore. We were building weapons. Weapons with names. The Orion's wake bore a new mark on her side, painted in rough strokes by refugee children, a flame rising from ashes. Others carried names whispered like prayers. Home's Wrath, Ash Reborn, Silent No More. We weren't a fleet. We were a funeral pyre waiting to be lit. The day came. The hunters arrived in force, black ships blotting out the stars, their jagged hulls bristling with weapons. The sky turned into a graveyard before the first shot was fired. Fear gnawed at my chest. I thought of the boy with the broken model ship, clutching it like a relic. I thought of the woman who refused to let her son die in silence. I thought of Earth, burned, gone, but never forgotten. And then the order came. Fire. The void erupted. Pulse cannons thundered. Railguns screamed. Torpedoes streaked like meteors. Human ships darted like angry hornets, small and fragile, but furious beyond reason. The hunters answered with annihilation. Beams carved through our lines. Ships shattered in silent bursts of flame. Every second cost us lives. But every second we spoke louder. The hunters had numbers. They had power. But they did not understand us. They thought fire only consumed. They thought fire only destroyed. They had forgotten that fire also spreads. When the Silent No More rammed a hunter cruiser, detonating its core in a burst that lit half the system, the comms filled with laughter, even as we wept. When the Ash Reborn disabled the Predator's ship with nothing but a mining beam and a prayer, the refugees cheered, as if Earth itself had risen again. When the boy's mother, her ship crippled, her voice calm, broadcast across all channels, "This is for Earth. This is for every voice you tried to silence." Before detonating her vessel in the heart of their formation, I felt something break inside me. Not despair. Rage. Grief transmuted into fire. We fought like demons. We bled stars into the void. And though we were dying, the hunters were dying with us. The battle was not victory. Not in the way the word is usually meant. Half our fleet was gone. The moon was shattered. The survivors scattered once more into the void. But something had changed forever. The hunters had come to extinguish us. Instead, they left scarred, bleeding, their fleets tore and burned. And more importantly, the galaxy had seen. Our signal had carried through the chaos. Colonies, smugglers, alien traders. They all watched as humanity, the silenced, the forgotten, spoke again, not in words, in fire. And I knew then, staring out the wreckage of friend and foe alike, that this was only the beginning. The silence was over. The inferno had begun.